This is Mr. Hanley back with the LG2 notes. Just a reminder, I am going to begin doing the Zoom sessions tomorrow. Depending on what class you're in, there's a different time. If you ever can't make the class that you're assigned to, just let me know and I can get you in another class. And attendance is not mandatory. I'm going to cover a lot of what I would teach right here in this video. But I will answer questions, and eventually what I would like to do is to be able to grade your packets, and we'll talk about the test that you have to take. I would highly suggest that you try to make as many Zooms as you can. So, LG2 notes on Japan. We're talking about a period of Japanese history called the Heian period. And it's called the Heian period because the capital moved from Nara, which we learned in the last learning goal, to a city called Heian. Today, that city is called Kyoto, and I'll talk later about why it changed names. Lots of very rich and powerful nobles kind of gathered around Heian, where the emperor resided. And at times, those nobles were actually, in fact, running the country, not the emperor. And we're also going to talk about a religion that was mentioned, but we'll talk more in detail about it, and that is the religion of Buddhism. So now I'm going to move to the next slide. Last time it got a little blurry, so I'm going to make sure this comes in on my screen. It's perfectly clear, so hopefully this is not blurry for you. As mentioned before, the imperial court, or a group of nobles that helped run the Japanese kingdom, we'll call it now, resided in Heian. And again, you'll find a lot of times in Japanese history that it wasn't really the emperor who was running Japan. It was either a powerful noble family, or, as we'll learn later, a powerful military leader called the shogun. And again, the city was called Heian. Heian means city of tranquility. And when the capital gravitated towards what became Tokyo, which was called Edo back then, there was a terrible war in Heian, and it was a civil war and a lot of death and destruction. So historians believe that the city began being called Kyoto after that war, and Kyoto means just capital city. So I guess it was pretty clear that Heian was no longer the peaceful city that it once was. Okay, so the art that takes place, we'll talk about this, and then I'm going to take a break from talking and show you a little video about one of the forms of art. A lot of the clothing that especially wealthy women would wear would be silk robes, and again, that silk was probably coming across the Sea of Japan and East China Sea from China. You have read in your book about Murasaki Shikabo and also another female author, Sei Shinagan, two of the top authors of that time. And it is interesting to note that in Europe, you would not have had female famous authors who were writing classic pieces of literature, because most females in Europe weren't taught how to read and write. And in Japan, women did not have equal rights. Let's not make any misconceptions about that. But in Japan, women did get an education, and from our sources, we see that a lot of the most popular writers were female. Interesting enough, Murasaki Shikabo and Sei Shinagan knew each other, and little girl drama, they didn't like each other. Visual arts, we see a lot of paintings, and we'll learn that the Japanese paintings a lot of times were of scenes depicting nature. Nature was an important part of the Japanese religious, Shinto, and as we will learn in Buddhism, they do expect to get some spiritual lifting from nature. So nature was a big aspect of the Japanese visual art, calligraphy as well. And then there's several performing arts, and you can see the list there. But what I'm going to show you guys is a little segment on the history of the Noh drama. And if I were asked if I wanted to go see a Noh drama, I would say I wouldn't want to drive far, nor would I want to pay much, but I would definitely want to go see it because it's pretty interesting and bizarre. but I can imagine after about 2 hours of it, I'd get kind of bored. So, but just to give you an idea of what no drama is like, I'm going to show you a little segment explaining the no drama with some images of modern day no performances. And so at the end, you'll have to answer, would you go to see no? And the answer might be yes, or it might be no.
What we call No today was really arranged and sort of perfected by Zeami in the Muromachi period, which was in the 1400s. But something called No, and that was No, was actually performed really since the Heian period, really more than 1,000 years ago. The no stage has changed over time. The original no stage was called the Kagura Den, which would be a place for court ritual dances that would be located at a shrine. The no stage most often used today, they've moved the entranceway or the passageway to the side so that you can see the actor more, not covered by the musicians. 4 main pillars are used so you can locate where the edge of the stage is, especially when you're wearing the masks. One of the main features of the no stage is a wooden board or a wall at the back of the stage that has a pine tree painted on it. You know, depending on the painter and the idea of the person building the stage, this pine can take many different forms. The basic measurement of a stage is sangen by sangen, which is about 6 meters by 6 meters. And almost all the no is performed in these kagura den. There would be different sizes. But even in modern no stages, it depends if they measure between the pillars or from the pillar to the pillar. So that will sort of change the dimension a little bit. But basically, it's a square shape. The basic idea is that the shite, or the main actor, is the conductor. He's supposed to be the one who sets the beat, who sets the pace. He's the axis around which everything revolves, and so the drummers are supposed to really be following the shite. The drummers really have to perceive what the shite wants. So if the shite is trying to slow things down and the drummer is rushing, then the actor will be angry. And if the actor is trying to speed things up and the drummers are not speeding up, then again, this idea of like somebody getting angry, right? The shite is the one who's paying for this entire performance, and so he hires the musicians and he wants them to, he's the one who has the concept of what's trying to be expressed. There are 5 schools of no, and each school of no has, of course, many actors, but there's only one headmaster, or head of the school. And so in the old days, the shite role would really only be performed by that headmaster. And so he was really the producer, the director, supervising everything, and really determining how the thing should be performed. Nowadays, a lot more people perform these shite roles, and so it's not quite as strict as it used to be. Best thing about no is to perform as shite. That's really what it's all about.
So, would you attend a no play? Yes or no? The other main idea that we want to talk about here in LG2 is how religion changed. And again, prior to the visitation and interaction between China and Korea, everyone in Japan practiced Shinto, and they didn't have a name for it. But one of the main religions that starts to impact Japan and really all of Asia is a religion known as Buddhism. It began in Nepal, spread throughout India, and then eventually came up north into China and Korea and ultimately Japan. It did actually come with a lot of elaborate rituals, which we'll talk about how that was a problem for some of the people in Japan. And because of that problem, there were new forms of it that were developing pretty much unique to Japan, but some of these new forms actually spread out of Japan into those other Asian regions as well, too. Okay, so first new version of Buddhism that develops is Pure Land Buddhism. And I'm going to put up some slides and some images to give you some idea about this religion of Buddhism. But suffice to say for now that its main goal was for its followers to focus and through meditation and correct behavior that they eventually would reach what's called nirvana or enlightenment. And so this Pure Land Buddhism called for achieving enlightenment in a very simple way. You didn't have to do a bunch of rituals and there weren't a bunch of rules. You simply had to chant the name of a previous Buddha, which there was more than one Buddha. There was the first Buddha, but there were later Buddhas. And you had to say the name of Amitabha Buddha over and over again. And eventually you would then receive enlightenment. So it was pretty simple. You just had to do the tongue twister, say Amitabha Buddha 100 times over, and you might find you stutter eventually. But it was a very simple way for the followers of Buddhism to be able to achieve enlightenment. A second form of Buddhism that is developed during this time in Japan was called Zen Buddhism. Sometimes people will say, hey, I found my piece of Zen. And so the idea behind Zen Buddhism was to create these ornamental gardens, which would be a place where one could meditate and concentrate and be able to work out the mental discipline to achieve enlightenment. And Zen Buddhism was very popular amongst the warrior class, which we'll talk about in the next learning goal, which are the samurai. All right, so that is what we have. The next LG3 will be the next topic. I will be putting notes for LG3 together over the weekend so that you could possibly watch them and take the test on Monday. So the packet says you're taking the test on Friday. You're more than welcome to. But I would advise you maybe to wait and take it on Monday after you see the notes for LG3. I am not going to be doing notes for LG4, but I believe those notes are pretty much a review of what we learned in the Middle Ages, along with what you're learning here in Japan. So to close, though, we're going to see some images and some more information on the religion Buddhism. And I will talk to most of you tomorrow on Zoom and hope to interact with you as soon as possible. And maybe one day soon, we'll be back in class. Buddhism was founded by Siddhartha Gautama in the region of Nepal around 500 BC. He went through a pattern of discovery, which eventually led him to be enlightened under the Bodhi tree, which made him the first and original Buddha, but not the only Buddha. There were others that followed. The basic belief in Buddhism is that the soul goes through a multitude of reincarnations and goes through many lives and is reincarnated as many different things as it tries to strive for the goal of nirvana. And nirvana is reached by following the Eightfold Path, which is part of the Four Noble Truths that were defined by Siddhartha Gautama, the original Buddha.